The galaxy was old and it had grown tired of war. Empires rose and fell like the tides of distant stars. Armadas clashed in burning skies, planets turned to ash, and the void swallowed fleets too large to count. Violence was not new. To the great powers, it was simply the language of survival. But through it all there was one name, one legend that lingered like smoke in the halls of every military academy: humanity. To the young, the word meant nothing. They had never seen a human. They laughed when old veterans spoke of them. But the elders remembered. Their eyes grew heavy when the name was spoken. For humans were not conquerors, not builders of empires, not like the Dominion or the Quran, clans or the endless Zix hives. No, humans had been something else, something far worse. They were a warning. The galaxy told their story in whispers. Humans were said to have fought like fire, burning bright, uncontrollable, and devastating. They did not always win, but when they lost, they left scars that never healed. Entire systems had been reduced to rubble in wars where humans refused to surrender. Even their enemies admitted it. To face a human was not to fight for victory, but to fight against extinction itself. And then, they were gone. Some said they destroyed themselves, their fury consuming their own world. Others believed they withdrew, retreating into the dark between stars, waiting for a reason to return. For centuries, no signal, no ship, no trace of Earth had been found. The galaxy moved on. Wars continued. Empires grew. The memory of mankind became a story told to frighten cadets, a ghost to keep admirals awake at night, until now. On the bridge of the Ixar Dominion's flagship Calresh, alarms whispered before. They screamed. A young sensor officer froze at his console, his crest trembling. "Admiral," he said, his voice barely a breath. I detect something." The Admiral, a creature of cold scales and harder pride, snapped his gaze forward. "Another rebel cruiser?" The officer shook his head. His hand shook as he magnified the reading. A single ship, alone, silent. Small compared to the Dominion's 3,000 vessels gathered in this sector. But its signal was clear. Its hull was unlike theirs. The computer struggled, comparing records long forgotten, reaching into archives, so ancient that dust clung to the data. And then, confirmation. The system printed the identification. Terran designation, human warship. The bridge fell silent. Even the machines seemed to hesitate. The officers stared at the single word glowing on their displays. Human. At first, someone laughed. A sharp, nervous sound that broke too quickly. Impossible, a glitch. Humans are myths. But no one joined the laughter. Every officer felt the same icy weight in their bones. The Admiral leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Check again." The computer did not change its verdict. Hull plating analysis confirmed Terran make. Design scars matched records from wars so ancient that the Dominion itself was young when they burned. It was real. And in that moment, the bridge remembered the old tales. They remembered what their ancestors whispered by the fire, what soldiers muttered before battles, what teachers dared not put into books. "If you see a Terran ship, pray." The Admiral's claws tightened on the arm of his chair. Outside in the endless black, a single human warship drifted like a corpse. No movement, no signal, no fleet behind it, just one shadow against the stars. Yet it was enough to make 3,000 Dominion warships pause, because every soul on that bridge understood something their minds refused to admit. If this ship was real, if the humans had returned, then death itself had come to watch them. The Dominion's Grand Armada was unmatched in size. 3,000 warships floated in perfect formation, their cannons sharp enough to slice continents, their missiles heavy enough to crack the crust of worlds. They were the terror of the spiral arms, the iron hand of the Dominion. And yet, their might meant nothing in that moment. Every captain, every soldier, every officer looked at the single dot on their screens. One ship, small, silent, alone. but its name carried the weight of 1,000 wars. The human warship. The sensor feeds flickered. The hull was old, scarred with burns from battles so long ago that most Dominion historians thought them legend. Its design was alien to their time, angular, practical, built for war and nothing else. No sleek beauty, no ceremonial banners. It was a weapon made into a shape, and the shape itself was a promise. We do not come to scare you. We come to end you. Whispers filled the bridge. Officers leaned close to one another, their voices breaking. It cannot be. Extinct. They were extinct. Why here? Why now? The admiral of the Grand Armada said nothing. He sat still, eyes locked on the drifting shadow. Around him, the fear of his crew was heavy, a fog no machine could clear. And yet what they feared most was not the sight of the human ship. It was the silence. The vessel did not move. No engines burned, no weapons powered. It simply drifted, as if waiting, as if watching. Maybe it is derelict, one officer said, forcing a thin hope into his voice. But hope was fragile here. The admiral finally spoke. His voice was steady but cold. Run full scans. The Dominion's machines obeyed. They pierced the shadow with beams of data. They scanned metal, engines, weapons. The results returned like knives. Power systems alive, though ancient. Weapons, charged, though quiet. Life signatures, blurred, unreadable, and the final line of text struck deeper than any weapon could. Terran origin confirmed. The bridge sank into silence again. One captain broke the stillness over the fleet channel. My Lord, this must be a trick. No Terran ship could survive this long. Perhaps rebels found wreckage and rebuilt it to scare us. His words were bold, but his tone cracked like glass. Another voice answered, softer. No rebel could fake this. No one would dare. On thousands of bridges across the Armada, crews stared at their screens. Some trembled. Some prayed. Some remembered the old warnings from their ancestors. Warnings that had once sounded like myths, but now felt like prophecy. The Dominion was vast. It had crushed hundreds of civilizations. Its fleets had broken empires older than itself. But this was different. This was not an empire, not an army, not a rebellion. This was a shadow from the past. The younger officers could not understand the fear that now strangled their elders. But the veterans knew. They had heard too many stories. Stories of human fleets that would fight until the last ship, then turn wreckage into weapons and fight again. Stories of battles where humans, outnumbered 100 to 1, turned the odds into graves for their enemies. Stories of commanders who would burn entire stars if it meant denying victory to their foes. Humans never came to conquer. They came when pushed too far. And when they came, they burned down everything in their path. Now that single warship drifted in silence before the Dominion's Grand Armada. No words, no threat, only a presence strong enough to unmake courage itself. The Admiral's claws dug into his chair as his thoughts swirled. Was it alive? Was this truly the return of humanity? Or was it simply their ghost come to remind the galaxy of what once was? But deep down, in the part of his heart he would never admit aloud, the Admiral already knew the answer. It was not a ghost. It was not a trick. The Terrans had returned. The order came down the fleet channels. Hold position. No ship was to fire. No ship was to move closer. And so 3,000 warships, strong enough to shake a galaxy, froze in the darkness of space. They did not fear enemies. They did not fear rebels. They feared the silence of one drifting shadow. The Terran warship. Young officers tried to steady their hands. Their scales twitched. Their breathing turned shallow. On some bridges, crew members whispered prayers they had not spoken since childhood. They could not look away from the screens. They could not look away from the ghost ship. The silence was unbearable. No warning. No signal. Not even a change in its orbit. Just one ancient, ship resting in the void like a coffin left open. "Why do we wait?" a young helmsman finally asked. "We are 3,000 against one. If it is alive, we can destroy it. If it is dead, we can break it apart." His voice was brave, but his eyes betrayed him. The others on the bridge did not answer. None wanted to be the first to strike, because everyone remembered the stories. One officer spoke softly, his voice shaking. "My grandmother told me once that when the humans fought the Zir clans, they lost an entire fleet in one day. But before their ships fell, they destroyed 3 times their number." Another officer whispered, "My ancestor fought against them too. He said humans were not afraid of death. That was what made them monsters. They were ready to die as long as their enemy died too." The admiral listened to these words, his jaw tight. He remembered the history his own teachers had hidden between lessons, the records that no one was supposed to study, the warnings written in red. "Do not provoke the Terrans, do not corner them, do not let them rise again." And yet here they were, a single ship, and already the Grand Armada was trembling. The younger crew members who had never seen war beyond simple rebellions laughed nervously to mask their fear. "It is one ship," they said. "It cannot fight us all." But the laughter died quickly. No one truly believed it, for deep inside, even the youngest knew. This was not about numbers. This was about something greater. The Dominion had power, yes, but humans had something else, something the galaxy had no word for. A fire, a will, a refusal to bow. It was the kind of strength that could not be measured on scanners or counted in fleets. It was something that lived in the blood, and that blood had not forgotten. The admiral finally stood from his chair. His voice was low but heavy with command. "Prepare all weapons, but hold your fire." The order spread through the fleet. Cannons powered up, shields rose, thousands of red targeting lines locked onto the silent Terran vessel, but no trigger was pulled. The human warship did not flinch. It did not turn. It did not even acknowledge them. It floated in the dark as if the Grand Armada did not exist at all. That indifference was worse than any threat. The officers felt it deep in their bones. This ship was not here to fight them. Not yet. It was here to remind them of something. A memory they had all tried to bury. The bridge grew cold. The silence deepened. The fear turned into something heavier. And slowly, very slowly, a thought began to grow in every heart. If this single warship was here, if it had survived when all thought humans extinct, then perhaps there were others. Perhaps an entire fleet waited in the shadows beyond their scanners. Perhaps the humans had never truly left at all, and if that was true, then the galaxy was already doomed. The Dominion fleet hung frozen in the void, 3,000 warships waiting. Thousands of targeting lines painted the Terran vessel, but no shot had been fired. It drifted like a dead thing, and yet every soul aboard the Armada felt its presence, like a predator hiding in plain sight. The admiral stood silent at the center of his bridge. His crew barely breathed. Waiting was torture. Every passing second stretched like a blade across their nerves. It was then that fear broke the first mind. On the destroyer Valark, Captain Valan lost control. He had served for 40 cycles, fought rebels, pirates, and even rival empires. But nothing had ever chilled him like this silence. His claws tapped against the arm of his chair, faster and faster, until he snapped. "This is madness," he hissed, his voice cracking. "One ship holds us all hostage? We are the Grand Armada of the Dominion." His officers tried to calm him. "Captain, the Admiral's order is to hold—" "I will not be haunted by a ghost," Valan roared. His talons slammed down on the firing controls. "No shadow of extinct humans will make me cower." Torpedo bays opened, engines burned. Hot. The Valark screamed through the void, breaking formation. Across the fleet, alarms rang. Commanders shouted, "Hold position, hold!" But it was too late. The first torpedoes were launched. Gleaming trails of death streaked across the dark. racing toward the Terran warship. All eyes watched as they closed the distance. The Dominion expected an explosion. Fire. The silence broken, but nothing happened as they should have expected. The torpedoes reached the human ship, then died. Not exploded, not destroyed. They died. Their engines cut off mid-flight. Their warheads melted like wax. Their systems went dark, as if the universe itself had rejected their existence. The wreckage floated, lifeless, into the void. And then, something far worse came. Every ship's comms erupted with static. The sound was not random, it was layered, heavy like whispers overlapping. The crews clutched their heads, their scales shivering, and through the storm a voice rose clear, a human voice. Calm, cold. You should not have come here. The words cut deeper than any blade. No anger, no shouting, just sorrow, spoken as if a parent scolded a child who would not listen. Across the Armada, terror bloomed. On the Valark, Captain Valen screamed, trying to fire again, trying to prove the fear wrong. But his own systems rebelled. His cannons turned offline. His consoles sparked. His crew shrieked as the lights flickered. Then with a sound like tearing metal, the destroyer turned, its weapons not at the human ship but at its nearest ally, and it fired. Chaos exploded. The Dominion's own destroyer tore into a cruiser, splitting its shields and ripping open its hull. The crew of the cruiser screamed in rage and confusion, believing betrayal had come. They returned fire. Beams of light cut across the dark, striking not the Terran ghost, but their own kind. Cease fire! Cease fire! Admirals howled across the comms, but their orders twisted into noise. Voices became warped. Some ships heard only laughter. Others heard screams that did not belong to their crews. Some heard nothing but the same human voice repeating, "You should not have come here." Madness spread like a sickness. A battleship panicked and launched missiles in every direction. A carrier opened fire on its own escorts, convinced they were enemies in disguise. Frigates rammed into each other, turning the void into a graveyard of metal. The human warship did not move, did not fire, did not react. It simply drifted, watching as 3,000 Dominion ships began tearing each other apart. On the Admiral's flagship, officers clutched their heads, trying to resist the whispers clawing into their minds. The Admiral himself stood stiff, his heart burning with rage and fear. He had commanded fleets against every enemy the galaxy had known, but never, never, had he seen soldiers lose themselves without a single shot fired by the foe. This was not war. This was madness, and it had only begun. The void became a battlefield without an enemy. The Dominion's Grand Armada, proud and unshakable, began devouring itself. Ships turned their weapons on allies. Cruisers ripped into battleships. Fighters launched from carriers without orders, tearing through anything in their path. The disciplined war machine that had once crushed empires now screamed with chaos. No command could stop it. On the Admiral's channel, voices shouted over each other. "Hold fire! Hold fire!" Another barked, "Target the Terran!" But every transmission came warped. Orders twisted into riddles. Some captains heard their superiors tell them to fire on their own escorts. Others heard silence. Some heard words spoken in human voices. Voices they knew did not belong to their kind. Fear poisoned every heart. On the frigate Dralith, a young captain tried to keep his crew steady. "Listen to me, do not trust the comms, do not fire unless I order it." But as he spoke, his display flickered. The screen showed human faces, dozens of them, pale eyes staring, lips unmoving. His crew screamed, some tearing at their helmets, as if to rip the images from their minds. The captain shouted again, but his words turned to static, and within moments, his own gunner fired without command. The Dralith shot down 2 of its escorts before being torn apart by the very carrier it had sworn to protect. On another wing of the fleet, panic reached its peak. A battleship commander shouted that the Terran ship was multiplying, that there were hundreds appearing in the dark. His crew swore they could see them too, ghostly shadows taking shape beyond the scanners. In terror, They launched their full payload of missiles into empty space. The detonations lit the void with fire, and then rained down on their own allies. Hundreds died in seconds. Through it all, the human warship did not move. Not a single cannon fired. Not a single shield flared. It simply drifted, watching, as if feeding on the chaos. The admiral of the Grand Armada stood frozen on his flagship. His claws dug deep into the armrests of his chair. His jaw clenched until his teeth cracked. Around him, officers clutched their heads or screamed at shadows only they could see. Some fell to the floor, convulsing as if their minds had been ripped open. "Fight it!" the admiral roared, his voice like thunder. "It is only fear. They cannot harm us." But even as he shouted, a scream rose across the bridge. One of his lieutenants had drawn a sidearm. His eyes were wide, unblinking, filled with madness. He fired into his own comrades, shrieking, "They are here! Humans are here!" The admiral shot him where he stood. Smoke filled the air, the smell of blood heavy. The bridge went quiet for a moment, only the sound of distant explosions through the hull. And then, more screaming. The admiral looked to the main viewport. His armada, the pride of the Dominion, was collapsing. Thousands of ships reduced to wreckage. Beams of light cut through the dark, striking friend and foe alike. Carriers spun, out of control. Destroyers rammed into battleships, exploding in fire that spread like disease. The void was filled with broken bodies and shattered steel. And yet, the Terran vessel remained untouched. Untouched, and untouched because it had done nothing. That was the most terrifying truth. The humans did not need to fire. They did not need to move. Their presence alone was war. Their silence was a weapon sharper than any blade, heavier than any cannon. For generations, the Dominion had thought itself unshakable, untouchable. But here, in the shadow of one drifting warship, the truth was revealed. The Dominion was not strong. It was fragile. It only needed fear to break. The admiral fell to his knees. His pride shattered as his armada burned around him. He knew then what the galaxy had always whispered, what his ancestors had feared. Humans were not conquerors. They were something far worse. They were judgment, and judgment had come to the Dominion. The Grand Armada was dead. Where 3,000 Dominion warships once floated in proud formation, now only wreckage remained. Burning hulks drifted through the void, colliding like broken bones. The silence of command had been replaced by the endless screams of failing engines, ruptured hulls, and dying crews. The void was filled with fire, and through the chaos, one warship stood untouched. The Terran vessel drifted quietly, its shadow steady, its silence more terrifying than the destruction itself. On the flagship Kalresh, Admiral Carvos still stood. His bridge was half ruined. Consoles sparked. Dead officers lay sprawled across the floor, their scales scorched, their eyes wide with terror. Survivors whispered, cried, or clawed at their own faces as if trying to tear the whispers from their minds. Carvos alone still resisted. His body trembled, his claws dug deep into the steel rail of his command platform, but his will had not yet broken. He was the last admiral of the Grand Armada, and he would not die without an answer. He opened the comms. Static hissed back at him, heavy and unnatural. Yet he forced his voice into the void, each word iron-willed. "What are you?" The bridge grew still. Even the sparks seemed to quiet. And then the voice came. Calm, human, close, as if it spoke directly into his ear. "You know what we are." Carvos's throat tightened. His pride screamed at him to resist, but his heart already knew the truth. Still, he pressed on. "The Terrans are extinct. You should not exist. How do you stand?" Before us, a pause. Then the voice answered, heavy with sorrow rather than pride. "We were never gone. We only chose silence." The Admiral's claws curled tighter. His mind swam with the stories, the warnings, the whispers his ancestors had passed down. He had ignored them all, believing them tales of fear. Yet here, with his armada in ruins, he understood they had not been myths. They had been promises. Why now? His voice cracked, half a growl, half a plea. Why return to us? The human voice did not rise. It did not rage. It spoke with the weight of mourning. You came where you should not tread. You hunted. You burned. You thought yourselves gods, and now you see the truth. You are nothing but children playing with fire. Carvos's chest burned with shame. He looked at the wreckage beyond the viewport, his proud fleet reduced to ash by fear alone. He wanted to deny it, to curse, to spit, but no words came. The human voice continued. We wanted peace, always. But the galaxy never let us rest. Every war we fought was one we did not choose. Every battle we bled in was forced upon us. And still, even in silence, even in our absence, you fear us. You fear us because you know what we are. The Admiral's knees bent under the weight of those words. He gritted his teeth, blood dripping from his jaw. And what are you then? Monsters? Demons? Gods? The voice paused, then answered like a knife in the soul. No, we are human, and that is enough. Carvos felt the strength leave him. He looked once more at the drifting shadow, the ancient warship that had ended his fleet without firing a single shot. The last fragments of pride inside him cracked and fell away. He was an admiral no longer. He was just another soul staring into the face of truth. On his ruined bridge, he whispered the words his ancestors had feared but never spoken aloud. If one human ship can do this, then none of us are safe. The voice gave no reply. The human warship turned slowly, silently, its engines sparking with ancient fire. It did not fire upon him. It did not finish him. It simply drifted past the wreckage, vanishing into the black as if it had never been there at all. And Carvos, last admiral of the Dominion's Grand Armada, fell to his knees among the corpses of his crew. His empire was dead, and the galaxy would never be the same again. When the Dominion's rescue fleets arrived weeks later, they expected survivors. They expected to find crippled warships clinging to life, desperate soldiers waiting for rescue. They expected explanations, reports, something they could twist into propaganda, but they found only silence. The battlefield stretched across an entire system. Wreckage floated like drifting tombstones, each shard a reminder of the Grand Armada that once ruled the stars. Fires still burned on broken hulls, their embers fading into cold ash. Bodies drifted through the void, frozen in final screams, their eyes empty and lifeless. Not one survivor was found. The rescuers searched for weeks. They combed through every ruin, every shattered deck. Nothing. No black boxes remained whole. No data cores survived. It was as if the battle had devoured even memory itself. And at the center of it all, there was nothing. No enemy ship. No Terran warship. Only a void where the shadow had once been. The Dominion tried to explain it away. The High Council ordered the news buried. They claimed the fleet had destroyed itself in a rebellion. They called it a mutiny, a failure of discipline. But their words did not silence the whispers. The crews of the rescue fleets had seen the wreckage with their own eyes. They had felt the weight of fear still lingering in the system, like an echo that refused to die. And soon the whispers spread. The Terrans are not extinct. The humans are waiting. No one knew if it was true. Some claimed the warship had been a ghost, an echo from the past that returned to punish arrogance. Others swore it had been real, a message from a people who had never truly disappeared. And a few, the quietest few, said something worse. That, if a single Terran ship could destroy an entire armada without firing, then what would happen if the humans had an entire fleet? The galaxy shuddered at the thought. Warlords paused their conquests. Pirates who once laughed at fear now looked over their shoulders at every shadow in the void. Empires that had fought for centuries against each other began to reconsider their wars. Because in the silence left by the Dominion's defeat, a single truth lingered. If humanity had returned, then every star was in danger. And still, the Terrans remained unseen. Weeks turned into months. The Dominion rebuilt what it could, but it could not rebuild its pride. Its citizens whispered in the streets, Soldiers refused to serve. Admirals looked at the stars with unease, knowing one warship had undone what thousands could not. Even those who hated the Dominion felt no triumph. The Quran clans, the Zix hives, the rival empires, they all feared the same thing. For if the Terrans had chosen the Dominion this time, who would be next? No one dared speak the answer. The silence that followed the battle was heavier than any war. It crept into the hearts of rulers and common folk alike. In every docking bay, in every war council, in every ship that crossed the stars, the same thought whispered again and again. Somewhere out there, a human warship is watching, and that thought was enough to change everything. For the galaxy no longer feared the Dominion. It no longer feared pirates or rival empires. It feared the return of those it had once hunted. It feared the humans. And in that fear, peace spread, not because the galaxy had grown wiser, but because terror was stronger than ambition. Conquerors paused, raiders hid, warlords slept uneasily, for warlords could be killed, empires could be broken, but ghosts could not be fought. And the humans, whether living or only legend, had become the greatest ghost of them all.